Okay, welcome back. This is Eddie, and this is part 2 of my beginner Blender tutorial. And this is the object we created last time. It's a nothing. It's not really an object. It's just a strange thing that I was showing you all the couple different things on. If you didn't see part 1, I would recommend watching it. And today I said we were going to do the basic modifiers. Hopefully this is going to be an extremely short tutorial. So I just deleted what we made, and I'm going to press Shift S, and I'm going to put the cursor to center. Showed you that last time. Okay, now I'm going to press Shift A, and I'm going to grab a cube, and I'm going to press Tab to go into edit mode. This is all stuff we covered in the previous video. I'm going to press W and subdivide. Okay, now one thing I didn't show you was a different kind of view mode, and if you press Z you go into wireframe view where you can see through the object. You can see the vertices on the other side, and what I want to do is I want to select all the vertices on, from our point of view, the left half of the cube. So if I go to view, and you have all these options here. I can view it from the top, in which case I would want these vertices. I could view it from the front, in which case I want these vertices. It's all just different camera angles to help you organize things. Now, if you look though, if you view it from the front, what you might expect to see is all these vertices lining up, like the top line up there, or if I move the camera down here. But we're in what's called perspective view, and what that means is that it has this kind of depth to it. And that's generally what you want for your final product. But for modeling, it might be easier to go to View, and then you see change the View Perspective / Orthographic, or Persp/Orth, Ortho, or whatever. And as you can see, you still have that cube. I can press Z to go back into solid mode again. Still the same cube, but if we view it from the front and we press Z, press Z, all the vertices line up. So now I'm going to press C to bring up that paint select. I'm going to drag down. I'm going to press X and delete. Now that we're in edit mode, there's more options in the delete menu. You can delete the faces, the vertices, the edges, or a combination of them. I'm just going to delete the vertices. Great. Okay. That's exactly what we wanted. So now we have half of a cube. Okay. So that actually kind of utilized a bunch of the tools from earlier. But now we're going to get into these modifiers. I'm going to go back into object mode by pressing Tab. I'm going to keep the half a cube selected. I'm going to add modifier mirror. Okay, as you can see, we have a whole cube again. And if you go into edit mode with the Tab button, the vertices are only going to show up on one side. Now this is because what Blender is doing is it's copying along this green axis right here. It's flipping everything, which is really helpful when you don't want to have to do things twice if you're making a symmetrical object like some kind of a person, or and basically, well, I can think of more things that are symmetrical than things that aren't, that would be useful for modeling. So I can select a vertex with the right click, and I can press G and I can drag it around. I can select a couple, I can press S, scale it, and I can model my thing. As you can see, it's mimicking it on the other side. Now, if you want to be able to see the vertices on both sides, you can right click this little triangle of vertices in the modifier window. I should have mentioned this before, sorry, that the modifier tab is up at the top in the right panel over here. It's the little wrench. So if you click that, now you can see that when I select a vertex, it's selecting it on both sides. So if I select this face, it's selecting it on the other side too. So that's kind of helpful. Okay. So now let's see. If I press A and W and subdivide, did that last video, and then I press W again and smooth, you can see that the two sides are pulling apart. And that's because if you click this little eyeball symbol in the modifiers panel, in the mirror modifier panel, then that hides the effects of the modifier. And you can see that this is the object Blender is working with. This modifier is sort of for your you're just as for you to see, but Blender is only working with this 1/2. So when it smooths it, it's rounding out just this object, and you want them to stick together. So if you go press Tab and you press G and then X, you're going to grab along the X-axis, which means you're pulling. I'm going to also press this eyeball again so that it displays the other half of the mirror, or the mirrored part of the object. So if you press X, if you grab along the X-axis, you're dragging the two halves towards and away from each other. And if you drag them towards each other, you'll see that they overlap and they pass right through each other. But you want them to merge together, or at least I want them to merge together right now. So I'm going to enable clipping, which is one of the options here in the right-hand most panel of the mirror modifier. It's right in the middle. So now I'm going to press G and X again to drag them close to each other. And you'll see those two, the vertices in the middle of the object, or right along the axis, merge together. Now if I left-click to accept the movement, and I press G again, you notice as I pull, they're sticking together. So I can't get that object into two separate objects again. So now I can go back and I can select everything, press W and smooth, and it's going to smooth more or less the way it would if it was just one cube. Now, let's say I wanted to make this even rounder and smoother, but one of the main thing in modeling and these 3D objects, is the vertices, and that's the main thing that takes your does the most intensive work on your computer. So you will slow down a lot, and you'll potentially run into some errors with Blender if you have a lot of vertices. Don't be too worried about that though. That's a common mistake, to be too worried about it, especially when you're just learning, because even if it takes your computer 4 days to do a 5-second video render or something like that, the process of learning, you don't want to be thinking about that when you're still learning how to do this stuff. So one way to save on that computer power is by adding another modifier in the Modifiers tab, and that is the Subdivision Surface modifier. I'm going to press, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little flustered here. I'm going to deselect everything in edit mode. The other way to change your mode instead of the tab button is down here in the little box. Just select the one you want, so we want edit mode right now. Now, you can, if you switch back and forth with the little eyeball for whether or not you can see it, you'll see it does look a little smoother, but not really that much smoother. Now, one way to see is you'll notice though that there's this gray, almost like a cage of where the vertices are, and then underneath that you have the actual mesh and the actual geometry, and then that's what it looks like with the Subdivision Surface modifier on it, which is smoother. But if you want to see them as one and the same as the effects of the Subdivision Surface modifier, you can again click this little, oops, sorry, I got a pop up here. I don't know if that's going to be on the screen recording. But anyways, you can click this little vertice triangle again, just like the mirror modifier, and as you can see, the cage is gone. It kind of snaps to the mesh, and there is your object with a Subdivision Surface modifier on. Now that's not that smooth still. You can still make out all the faces and everything. So maybe if you go to View, you bump it up with the arrow button to 2. Oh, that's very smooth. Now that's kind of overkill for a cube. I don't know if I'd ever need to use that much for a cube, but for our example it works. Now if you see there's 2 of these, there's View and there's Render. Excuse me. Now, View is how much you can see right now. Render is going to be your final product. So if your computer's going slow with working with it, but you do want it to have some higher level of detail in the end, you can set your render to whatever you want and then put your view down. Bump it down to 1, and then you can only work with the lower detailed one to save computer power, or to save some work for your computer to do, and then bump it, render back up so that when your final product is more detailed. But Right now we can put them both at 2, which is nice and smooth. Now you can still see the faces, and the only way to get rid of that is if you press T. Oh, I should have said this before, I apologize. You probably have these 2 panels here, if this is your default view of Blender. T and N, change them. T is on the left, N is on the right, and I usually like to hide them when I'm doing stuff and then bring them up when I need them. But right now we need the one on the T, the left toolbar. And under shading, if you can see, this might be dragged up a little bit. There's 2 panels. If you go into object mode down here with the tab button, and under object tools, which should be the top panel, and you go to shading and you press smooth, you should then see that you can no longer see the faces. It just makes things a little bit smoother. Now if we hide this subdivision surface here, by pressing the eyeball button, you can see that you can still see the edges. Like up here you can see the edges. It's not really any smoother. It's just that you can no longer make out those faces at these right here. It's slightly smoother, which is why you still need the subdivision surface modifier to really smooth out this cube into like a nice blobby thing. Anyways, I'm going to press T to hide that panel again, and I would argue that those are probably the 2 most commonly used important modifiers to know initially, besides maybe like the armature and stuff like that, which is how you do animation, but those are later tutorials. So that wraps up this tutorial. So yep, the next one is going to be starting out modeling. So we're going to pick an object. I think I did this once before, not recording, not on a video. I just did this by myself as an exercise once before, and I really liked it. I'm going to model a flash drive, or a thumb disk, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to call it a flash drive. And yep, and probably going to do a couple of mini series of things like that, which are just practice. And so yeah, thank you for watching. This is Eddie, and I will see you in part 3.